Most players, when they mishit the ball, are slicing. Now, two key things cause that slice. One of them is the swing path, so when the club swings down and through impact, the club tends to swing across the ball to the left. The other is controlling the club face, and the club face is likely to be open, and that occurs a lot with slicing. In fact, a lot of the time it's both of those things. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at how the wrists work so that we can get better control of the club face through impact. Hi, I'm Peter Knight, and I've created this channel, Peter Knight Golf, to help you play the best golf you can. Today, we're going to have a look at the movement of the wrist. So just to start with, if we look at the movement of the wrist and what we call that, so here the back of my wrist is in line with my arm, so my wrist, I'll say my wrist is flat. If I move my wrist this way, so it's bending my wrist up like that, that's called extending my wrist. So now it's flat, and if I go the other way, or this way, that's called flexing my wrist. So during the golf swing, the wrist does flex and extend during the swing. What we want it to do is flex and extend at the right points and only an appropriate amount. So if we go through the movement, then we'll have a look at a couple of drills we can do to control this. So first of all, when I grip the club, I've already got a little bit of a bend or a little bit of extension through that left wrist there. Now, for most players, it's going to be somewhere around about 20 degrees, give or take 5. If you've got sort of 25 degrees of bend, that's quite a lot. If you've only got about 15, it's quite a little. So but it's going to be something like that. If you've got anything like a neutral grip, you're going to be okay, probably, but you still check it. When the club gets to the top of the swing, what we're looking for is for that flexion or the bend in the wrist to be a little bit less. Now, the other term that's used for that bend is called cupping. So if I swing the club back to the top of the swing, so when I get back to here, you can see the back of my hand and my forearm are in line. Very, very common is for players to have too much flexion there or too much cupping as the club gets to the top of the swing. So it might, for a lot of players, it's more than what they had at the start of the swing. And when the club swings down, in some players that actually increases. Now, if I put the club here and we have a look at the club face itself, any change to my wrist is going to be reflected in the club face. So the more my wrist cups, you can see the toe of the club starts to point toward the ground. So when the club of the toe is pointed to the ground, the club face is opening. Now, unless I make some sort of change to that as the club swings down and through, the club face here is excessively open. And then when I get to the golf ball, unless I've made some sort of dramatic movement to square it up, the ball's going to start to the right of my target, which of course I don't want. So how do we control that? If we go to impact, so at address, I'm setting up and I've got some little bit of extension through the wrist there. Ideally, when I strike the ball, my body has rotated a bit, my hands are further forward, and the rotation has brought them forward. And that also has the effect of flattening the wrist there. So now my shaft's also leaning forward. So that feel you get where you're compressing the ball, you can't do that unless you've got some forward shaft lean. I'm talking about iron shot sitting on the ground here. So how you move that left wrist has a big influence on that. So a couple of drills that we can do. If you suspect that you're someone, or you have a look at the video and you see your sort of impact is looking something like this, which creates a lot of difficulty in getting the club to meet the ground correctly and in the correct spot. What we can do is, first of all, if I swing the club back to this point here, so at this point, I've still got a little bit of flexion through that wrist there. I'm actually going to excessively, to begin with, bend my wrist. So it feels like I'm turning my hand so my hand is facing a little bit toward the ground. And you can see that's closed my club face. Now, from here, if I have the sensation of keeping my wrist in this condition here, as I swing down and through, so I'm turning my body, and you can see that the club is now trailing my left arm, so that when it meets the ground, say where the ball is, the shaft would definitely be leaning forward. So the first way to practice this, swing it back, change, and then practice swinging through. So just very slowly to start with. The movement won't have much rhythm in it, we'll get to that, but just getting that sensation. If you feel like your hands want to do some work, very, very common, then this drill is especially for you. The second step is to feel like that wrist goes into that flexed position a bit more fluidly so that there's no stopping the swing. It's just a continuous motion. So I swing back, and as the club starts to swing down, the wrist starts to move this way. Now, most players will do that a little bit, but if you've got an excessive amount of extension through the end of the backswing, you have to do so much work to try and get that club face square. So if I make just a little swing here, I'm going to swing back, and then from there, as I swing down, I feel like I'm letting the club face close or letting this wrist flex a little bit, and then almost feel like I'm holding it a little through impact. So the shot that I hit there took off really low because the shaft had quite a lot of lean on it. When I swing back more quickly, it's not going to be exactly the same, but I want to feel like I've got the same type of movement. So now, if I make a slightly longer swing, now when I get back to the end of the swing, so I'll swing back a little bit less than full swing here, but as the club swings down, I still want to feel like the wrist is going into that little bit of flexion as it swings down and through. And again, the best way to do this is with less than full swings and less than full power. When we get to a point where the swing starts to work at normal speed, the tendency will be for this movement to default to its normal pattern. So now I'll swing the club back to about shoulder height in my backswing, and then have the feel like the wrist is going into that little bit of flexion as I start down. And again, because I'm making a shorter swing, the ball, you'll see from the side view there, that ball's taken off quite a bit lower than normal. As I increase my swing speed, the ball is naturally going to start to fly a little bit higher, but I'm again looking for that same motion. So I'm going to need to practice it with shorter swings, slower swings, to get the feel of creating that movement as a fluid motion. So then if I make a full swing, it's exactly the same motion, and the ball flies higher, but still if you stop the video, say at impact, you'll see that the shaft was leading forwards. So again, that gives me the feel of getting that compression. So practice that movement to get control of the left wrist there. And of course, whatever I do with my left wrist is going to influence my right as well. But I'm practicing getting that feel of that motion as I go through, so there's no flippiness with the movements, which is actually going to, influence how I strike the ball. But practice that movement with the slow swings, with the less than full swings, gradually build it up, do it with every club, and you'll find that with your iron shots especially, you'll have a much stronger sense of getting that compression.